What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Import Modify. I believe I got all the parts necessary in order to get this thing started for the first time. So let's go ahead and start this thing. Stay tuned. Alright, so I got the coupler in. That's 2.5 inch to 2.75 for the throttle body. That's good to go. And I installed the coupler down there. It's an elbow coupler, 90 degree, 3 inch to 2.5 inch. And that's basically what I'm thinking about doing, is getting it to come through right here. And the room that we have right there is where we're going to have the intake pipe come out to bend through right here. And we'll mount the air filter somewhere up right here. That way we got fresh air going into it. So that's what I'm hoping to do. So we got that, we got this, and I got the clamps that I need in order to mount that up. So we're good on that. And I also configured this up real quick. This is the mass airflow sensor. And being that I have minimum room to get to the front of the car, we have to do 2.5 to get it through there. So I got reducer couplers, 3 inch to 2.5 inch on both sides. And I went ahead and ordered this tight bend 90 degree 2.5 intercooler pipe, and it's a lot thicker than your standard piping because I need to drill and tap it with this tap kit I got in order to mount up this fitting here, because that's where the catch can is going to feed into. And I also located me a coolant coupler so we can modify that radiator hose and get those radiator hoses mounted up. I got my clamps that I needed, that I was missing. And also I got me a Spectra air filter because I was over at O'Reilly's and I saw it and I said, hell, why not? And I got me another coupler in case I need to use it. So we're good to go on this thing, I believe. And I did get hoses for the catch can itself right there. There's a catch can. We're going to mount that up as well. So hopefully with all this, we'll be able to get all that installed, get the wiring plugged in, and just do a couple other little things that we have to do in order to start this thing for the first time. So let's go ahead and get this all put in. Alright, so it looks like this configuration is going to work great. And like I was talking about earlier, we have just enough room in order to put a 2.5 inch pipe to feed through on the side right there to get it towards the front end of the vehicle. And this is where we're going to mount the air filter up in this general area right here. So now that you know the game plan, let's go ahead and finish getting this all bolted in. I'll show you what it looks like in the end. Alright, so intake's done for the most part, and I gotta say I'm pretty happy the way it came out. And the air filter is pretty much centrally located right there, away from the engine bay heat. And like I spoke about earlier, we had to do a 2.5 inch pipe right here because there's no way to fit a 3 inch between there. That's the reason I did what I did. But all in all, this is gonna be out of the way of the engine heat. So we're good on that. I didn't have to alter the pigtail on the connector for the mass airflow sensor. So that's good. We got the blow-off valve mounted up. And I just used some existing hoses that were on the car originally. And I got it teed off right here. One part feeding the boost sensor and the other part to the manifold, teed off to the blow-off valve. So we're good on that. And we're going to go ahead and get this catch can set up. And the catch can, we have two holes right here, but they're just too small. So I'm going to drill one right in the middle. And I'm going to utilize this bolt hole right here and the bolt hole right there is already threaded, so we'll just use that location right there. We'll mount it up like that, and then from there I can slide it back and forth to get the proper angle I need. And once I got the hoses feeding from the valve cover to this point right here on the catch cans, I'll figure out exactly where I'm gonna go ahead and drill and tap on the elbow piece. So let's go ahead and do that and we'll move on. Alright guys, I had to get a little bit creative on the catch can setup, but it'll work for the most part. And what I did was the areas where this rubber hose to the catch can is basically above the manifold. It's going to get the most heat. I went ahead, took some thermal tape, and I wrapped it with thermal tape just to give me a peace of mind. And I ended up coming up with an idea for these angle pieces on the valve covers. And basically what I did, I couldn't find a proper hose that would fit over this valve cover outlet right here. And these I don't know what these are, polyurethane hoses. They stretch pretty easy over it. So I ended up using these old hoses from, you know, before I turned that was on the engine before, and I went ahead and stretched it over, and then I took a razor blade and cut it, and then I used a 90-degree coolant coupler, and I just chopped the barb piece off of one end right here, as you can see, so I can give it a flush enough fit in there, and I could put a hose clamp on that. Now I left the barbed end on this side, and then I have an adapter because this hose is actually like a 3/4 inside diameter. So I have another coupler that goes 3/4 to 1/2, and then I feed it back around to the catch can. Now, that's the best setup that I could come up with, and you know, it'll work. I'll put some clamps on it. It'll be nice and secure. And I did the same on the other side right there, because I needed a 90-degree angle piece, because a big loop down, it's just gonna look too funky. This is the best I could come up with what I have around, you know, the shop and on hand. So I think it did okay for the most part, and I wrapped this up with thermal tape as well because the red was just too much. And I have hose clamps on the ends right there. I'll kind of cover that up. Only thing you'll be really seeing is these red base pieces right there. So all in all, I think it's pretty good. Now I got the dot marked right there, so I'm gonna have to take this elbow piece out. We're going to tap it and install the other fitting wherever that's at. I misplaced it, so I'm gonna have to look for it. Here it is, and we'll go ahead and install that right there, and then I'll run a hose from here to there, and of course I'm gonna have to wrap that up with thermal tape as well, because it's gonna be actually the closest one to the exhaust. So cool deal. Let's go ahead and get that done, and then I'll show you what it is in the end, and then we'll move on to the radiator hoses. Okay, so we're making good headway. We got the upper and lower radiator hose installed. I did install some clamps here on these hoses for the catch can and also on the elbow pieces. So right now I'm gonna move on to the TPS and throttle switch. Now this item right here, I got this from a 240SX, I believe the KA24DE engine, and it has a combination of both what I need. It has the throttle switch right here, and this connector right here is actually a TPS signal, was the sensor of it. So it has both of them in there, and I need both in order to satisfy the stock ECU and the apexy unit. So I'm going to go ahead and install this now, but this right here has a gap right there on the side, and I'm going to trim off some bolts, backspace it with some washers so that I can get a nice, clamp down on it. And probably for the first start, I'm not gonna rig up the TPS because I'm gonna have to make a voltage divider to reference a 5-volt signal to this. So just to satisfy the stock ECU for now, I'm gonna wire this in, and actually the connector is the same, it plugs right in. So that will satisfy the stock ECU, and I just wanna be able to input parameters into the apex unit so I can start it up for the first time. And that's the whole goal of this video, is me to get this thing started for the first time. Then after I get it started and get some of the fuel trims about where I need it to be, I will wire this in, and then I will do the rest I got to do to the apex unit. But we're making good headway on this, so I'm going to go ahead, trim off these bolts, mount that up, and then we will move on from there. So I ended up bypassing the heater core, and the reason for that being is this right here is a vacuum operated valve, and with it in the resting position, it is open, and the vacuum hose that controls that is missing. I can't find where it is. That's another fight in the future. I don't want coolant continuously circulating through the heater core, getting the cabin hot, so I bypassed it for the time being with this U-shaped hose. Got that done, and I need to get me a plug now for the PCV valve to plug that off. And also I need to get a plug for the coolant side on the intake manifold, well, the lower intake manifold. There's that right there. There was a sensor right there, but the wire was broken off of it. So I'm just gonna plug that, and I'm gonna plug the PCV, and then from there we'll be able to turn it on, get the parameters loaded on the apex unit, turn it over, prime the engine for oil, and start this thing for the very first time. All right, just a quick update. We're making good headway on it. I got the spark plugs in. I did turn the key on to verify for fuel leaks. It was holding just fine until recently it started leaking where the pressure gauge is at. So we're gonna go ahead and swap out that gauge for this Marshall gauge. It's a better gauge. And this fitting ought to work better than the one that was supplied from the fuel pressure regulator company. So we're gonna go with this Marshall gauge. We're gonna install that. Hopefully that'll fix that leak. And also, I still have to wire in the power to the wideband gauge, so I'm gonna do that real quick. And also, I got this set of spark plug wires made by Taylor, Thunderbolt 8.2 millimeter. They're supposed to work very well with the MSD kit, so I'm gonna install those. And after we get this all squared away, we'll be able to start it for the first time. And I actually went through the manual, and I did the first initial setup for the apex unit. And once we get it running and everything, I'll go through the parameters and let you guys see how that all works. So let's get these things done, and we'll get back to you. All right, so we got the gauge in place. It don't seem to be leaking. I got the power connected to the wideband gauge. We got Eric in there. He's gonna crank it up so I can look things over. And I got the distributor on loose. I did get the strobe light out. So once it's running correctly, I can adjust the timing. And we're pretty much a go from now to get this thing started. So let's cross our fingers and hope that everything works out. Crank it. All right. Alright guys, so a lot of problems I ran into trying to get this thing started for the first time. And one of the problems initially being was the distributor was 180 degrees out of phase. So we figured it out, we put it back in the proper position. We got it to fire up for the first time, but unfortunately it was misfiring very badly. So we turned it off, was checking things over, making sure the spark plug wires were seated properly, just going over the connections and whatnot. And then whenever we tried to restart it again, it just would not fire. So I put a Noid light on the fuel injectors. We are getting pulse to that, but we're not getting a pulse to the coil now. It's probably something as simple as a fuse or whatnot, but unfortunately I am out of time for this episode. And another thing that I don't like is that fuel pressure regulator, man. I got it adjusted all the way out and it's idling at like 60 PSI and it's way too high. So I got some things I need to, check out, and some things we got to figure out to get this thing running right. But that's going to have to be, unfortunately, on another episode. I am all out of time for this one. So at least we got it started for the first time, even though it's not running properly. So I guess we could say we met the goal of the episode, if you're going to cheat about it. But anyway, they are what they are. It's project life. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Things rarely go right the first time. Process of elimination, we got to work through it, and we will. We'll get this thing running right, and we'll take it on rips, and we'll just see how well it runs after that and see how much of a difference this turbo makes. But that's going to be in the future. So I'm going to wrap it up now, guys. Y'all know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will definitely see you guys on the next episode.